Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. I was stumbling upon some of the articles on some of the mainstream media websites, the fake news of CNN. I like to see obviously what they're talking about, what propaganda they're pushing. And I came across this article on the main page for CNN and I had to do a video on it. If you're new to all of this stuff, this will be really important in your awakening. If you're a follower for a long time, you've probably known some of these things, but you should still definitely listen to this. So they're pushing that Apple's 1984 Super Bowl commercial changed advertising forever. And they're talking about how in the year 1984, Super Bowl Sunday, you turn on the TV, you see a procession of stern men marching through a tunnel. No, it's not the Los Angeles Raiders. It's the most important Super Bowl ad of all time. Apple's iconic Macintosh advertisement, simply called 1984, based on George Orwell's novel of the same name, featured a Big Brother figure addressing hordes of subjects from a giant screen and a woman who escapes riot police to smash the screen with a hammer. When viewed now, it is the epitome of the 1980s, CRT TVs, dramatic voiceovers, and big hair. But back then, it was unlike any commercial America had ever seen. They sold 150 million worth of computers in 100 days. And while it wasn't the first computer ever sold to market, it was the first successful mass marketing computer campaign with a GUI interface, which is a computer screen with a mouse, what we once thought was a normal computer with a mouse, which eventually, of course, we know the transition is coming to all of these things being embedded in our bodies. Right now, the transition from the desktop is obviously wearable technology and the cell phone. It continues to get smaller and smaller till it's inside your body. So when I saw that article on CNN, I did a Google search, and all of these different websites are promoting this Apple ad from 1984, and it aired 41 years ago. So it's not like it's a 25-year anniversary or it's a 50-year anniversary, and yet it's all over the place. And then I saw an article pop up that they did this last year. 40 years ago, the ad changed the Super Bowl forever. So they clearly just want to keep putting this out there and rubbing it in people's faces. And if you haven't seen this advertisement, keep in mind when you watch it, the police state, the man speaking on the screen, and all sorts of discussions about how we need to unify. We, the people, are one. And remember, this is just for a computer. Look.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of vain contradictory thoughts. Our unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
So obviously there's nothing big about that commercial. There's nothing that would say that's the greatest Super Bowl ad or the biggest Super Bowl ad of all time. But I want to point out some things that you may not have noticed, including all of the things that tie into Apple and the mark of the beast. You may have noticed that man on the screen, right? He kind of had a voice that sounded like a German, right? A voice that kind of sounded a lot like Klaus Schwab, no? And in fact, if you look at the two side by side, you would say it looks exactly like Klaus Schwab. Now, that's Klaus Schwab today, but what about Klaus Schwab in the 1980s? Well, that looks even more like the man on the screen because Klaus Schwab has been aged for quite some time. So it must be a coincidence that the person on the screen looked like Klaus Schwab, and you might say, well, that's because they were trying to copy the movie 1984, which ironically also came out in 1984. However, they weren't, because the man the antagonist in the movie, Big Brother, has a mustache. Doesn't look anything like Klaus Schwab. In fact, it came out December 14th of 1984, where that Super Bowl ad came out in January of 1984. And you may have said, well, maybe they produced it before January of 1984. Nope, they filmed it in March and October of 1984. So it's almost as if they knew then, while Klaus Schwab was walking the earth, while Klaus Schwab was the face of the World Economic Forum, which he founded in 1971, they knew what was to come. They knew what needed to be done with the advancement and the push and the marketing, most specifically, right, of this technology, because they already had the technology. It was about marketing the technology. It was about how do we get people at home and how do we get people in offices to sit and be on these things for their entire day? How do we get them to be dependent on them? How do we do this? Well, it's going to take time, right? It's going to take decades of time to go by where people get more and more accustomed to this, and then the parents push it onto their kids. The schools start integrating it in the kids' lives, and that's where we are now. So obviously that's not a coincidence that that man looks exactly like Klaus Schwab. And of course they tell you with their fleet police force, it says fleet or army on earth, we are one people with one will, one resolve, right? The motto of the New World Order, one. And it said on the screen on January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. Because, of course, they don't want you to think that they're one and the same. When the computer came out and they started marketing the computer with the Macintosh computer, people might have thought about a futuristic society as described in 1984 with flying drones in a surveillance state. It might have said, hey, we don't want it to be like that. So they show you the computer. They show you that you could draw dinosaurs on the computer. You could play little ping games on the computer, Pong, things like that. It's nothing like 1984. It's quite like 1984. In fact, it is 1984. And look how far we've come, right? We've come all the way from the Apple computer to AI governance and the AI governance alliance, right? And what role does Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs play in all of that? Because Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak created the Apple computers. They created the Macintosh. In fact, Apple I went on sale in 1976 for $666.66. Do you think that that was a coincidence? I know most people talk about Steve Jobs, but nobody ever talks about Steve Wozniak. Here is Steve, what we would call a crap-eating grin on his face, explain to you why that first computer sold for $666.66.
Over here, we've got the very first computer we ever built. I hand-wired the entire bottom, soldered it all together. That was an Apple I, the first Apple I computer ever.
Those were the most incredible times. The summer that I built the Apple I computer, I was totally aware that a revolution was close to starting. Steve Jobs came into town. He'd pop into town, see what I was up to, the latest thing I designed for fun, and then he'd somehow turn them into some money for both of us. So Steve Jobs went in to sell him some of our little boards that we built for $20. He said no. They want to buy the thing ready to go. It cost us $250 to build maybe. We'd sell it for $500. And then the retail price was $666.66 because I, as a mathematician, like repeating digits. And that was what it should be.
So obviously, if you were born yesterday, you would take Steve Wozniak at his word, right? You would be so dumb to believe that a significant biblical number like 666 that ties in with taking a mark of the beast, the mark of the beast, and ties into a beast system, and ties into people not being able to buy or sell, and also ties into people being unsalvageable. Because in Revelation chapter 14, verses 9 through 10, the Bible specifically talks about being tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And it shows and tells that great suffering will come to all who receive the mark of the beast. So you might say, well, what are you talking about? The mark of the beast having something to do with owning the Macintosh computer? So if you went and you bought the first Macintosh for $666, you took the mark? No, but this is a subtle way of them letting you know how technology ties into the mark of the beast. And that's something that everybody should be able to realize now. The people who talk about Sunday law don't understand the worship that is going to be needed with the mark of the beast and how human beings are conductors of energy. And energy is going to be very much needed. Like energy is used in witchcraft and sorcery, energy is going to be needed to feed the beast. So there will be worship associated with the mark, but it will be technology. And now, Apple's logo is another great example to show you while we're on the subject of Apple. Do you think that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, in addition to selling the first computer for $666.66, decided that they wanted to use the apple as a logo? They big fans of apples, maybe apple sauce. They go to apple farms and pick apples every year together while holding hands. I mean, what's the deal with the apple, right? And why is there a bite in that apple, most specifically, right? Of course, the bite in the apple represents the serpent who tempted Eve to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the forbidden fruit. Remember, they believe they have that forbidden knowledge. And don't forget, on the subject of AI governance, talking about Apple Intelligence, which is the transition, right? We've gone from the computer to all of these devices to the iPhone, to the eye lens, right? The eye goggles, the Vision Pro, all these things. And Apple Intelligence is the next step. Apple AI, right? And what is that logo that Apple's using for their app for Apple AI? It looks a lot like the star. How many points is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, 7. 7, right? A heptagram. And what is the heptagram known for in the occult? Well, it's used in the symbol for Babylon in Aleister Crowley's occult system, Thelema, right? But that must be a coincidence as well, especially when people like Elon Musk, who is bringing in AI governance with Donald Trump, tell us that artificial intelligence is literally summoning the demon, right? These must all be coincidences tied in with Apple. And I'm not saying that if you own an Apple product, you've taken the mark of the beast. And believe me, you might be saying, well, who's saying you're saying that? There's people who listen to my videos and then they hear what they want in their own head. So they'd hear this, they'd be like, he's saying that Apple's the mark of the beast. I didn't say that Apple was the mark of the beast. I'm saying that these things are revealed to us. They're in front of us. We see the 666 associated with CERN. We see the 666 associated with Google in their logo. We see it associated with Apple. Well, what's the common theme with those? Technology, the creation of the World Wide Web at CERN, the most known and common internet browser used by Google. In fact, it's become a verb or a noun, whatever you want to call it. It's used in sentences. People say, I Googled this. Google that. Can you Google it? And then what's the most popular phone? What's the most popular computer? What's the most popular tablet? Oh, all Apple devices that have a direct connection to the mark of the beast. And that number, 666. So there's no such thing as coincidences, but isn't it interesting how in our faces this stuff is? Like somebody decided to write an article in 2025. There's no anniversary. It's 41 years, right? I would give a pass, kind of, if I saw it for 25 years. I'd probably still point it out to people so that they can see the conditioning in the program. You see all the people in that video, the police state, how people were wearing masks in that video, how that video came out a year before the movie 1984. So the depiction of the man on the screen who looks a lot like Klaus Schwab, they knew then what Klaus Schwab's role would be in bringing about a 1984 surveillance state, because he's the one who wrote of the fourth industrial revolution. And I bet he wrote it back then and it was ready to go. And they just waited until people got integrated with tech for him to release it in the year 2016. And now you're seeing that same guy in the Orwellian commercial who is the face of AI governance, who's standing above all governments and shaking hands and hugging and kissing and being friends with the Donald Trumps of the world, the Joe Bidens of the world, the Putins of the world. All of these guys who all are divided amongst each other, all have one common friend. And it seems to be Uncle Claus, who, by the way, has stepped down as the face of the World Economic Forum, but clearly hasn't, because we just saw him there this year, proudly drooling and welcoming Donald Trump to their forum. This tells us that technology is the ushering in of the mark of the beast, that AI governance will tie into this, and the internet of bodies. And Apple will probably play a big role in it. I've said often in my videos over the years, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple came out with their newest phone. Let's say Apple just discontinued their phone and they said, we're going to make a new phone. We're going to wait a year, and everyone, all this build up for the phone. And they came out and called it the mark of the beast. that people would not even blink. And then they say, well, the phone isn't actually a phone. It's actually something that goes inside your body. And people out there still probably wouldn't blink. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying that that's what it is. But that's the state of idiocracy that we live in now, where all these things that are in front of us. The Bible is a blueprint. It tells us all of these things. It's a blueprint for how to live. Prophecy and prophets tell us and warn us of the things to come. They're not hidden from us. These things aren't going to be rocket science where you're going, I'm looking for the 666. Is it on the bottom of someone's shoe? It's in front of us. They use it over and over and over again. And why is there a constant theme and a tie-in with technology and the internet and CERN, people trying to open up a black hole, and the countless others like Google Chrome, like I mentioned, who uses 666 in their logo? There's no such thing as coincidences, and clearly, putting this out there makes zero sense. By far, it is not one of the best commercials of all time. It's not one of the most iconic ones, but to them it is. To them it is because it began the push, right? It began the push for people to buy these Macintosh computers because some people thought the commercial was cool. And suddenly they sold X amount of computers, right? 150 million worth in 100 days. And suddenly they went from how do we figure out how to get people into the internet, onto the internet, get computers first, then we'll transition to the internet and everything else without them being scared of movies like 1984. Well, let's make a commercial. We'll make it real cool. Then we'll tell them it's nothing like 1984. Wink, wink. And then we'll sell it to them and they'll buy it and they'll tell their friends and we'll put ads out over and over and we'll put things in the news about how it's helping people at work and people will start buying it, right? And it means a lot to them because we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for propaganda like that 1984 Macintosh commercial. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you found this video useful. Share it with others who don't know this information. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.